Welcome back to the ADI Part 1 podcast with me, Josh Holleran.
And me, Craig Breeding.
Today's episode, we are going to be talking about how the ADI Part 1 links to the ADI Part 3. So we will get straight into it. There are some direct links from the ADI Part 1 and studying for that will give you information that will help you tick off some of the competencies as part of your part 3 test when you get to that stage in qualifying. Before we discuss those competencies and how it all links, where do you see the links, Craig, between the part 1 and the part 3?
There's a lot of information contained within many of the publications available for people to buy that direct people towards part 2 and part 3. And we spoke about part 2 last time. But in part 3, there are so many things to do with teaching and learning strategies, or choosing a proper training route, or it might be something to do with proper Q&A or giving directions. This information will be assessed potentially on your part 1, and the answers to that can be found in the various different publications. But when you start to look for that, there's a lot of books to thumb through. But I don't think we can undervalue how much part 1 can play into part 3 in terms of learning. We talk about coaching a lot and client-centered a lot. And the only way you're going to get that knowledge on client-centered and coaching is to actually do a little bit of research. And that's what we hope to do within these podcasts, is to direct people to the places where they can go, whether that be through publications, whether it be through online resources, whether it be through YouTube videos, or even watching some of the videos that you've done, Josh, in the past with some people. So much there that people can get, which is going to help them with their part 1, but definitely help them with their part 3 as well. I feel like the part 3 people struggle with quite a lot because they don't have the knowledge. And you're not going to get the knowledge if all you do is scroll through an app and just answer question after question. First, you need to know what the question is, then you need to know what the answer is, but then you need to understand what the answer is. And that understanding comes from the knowledge you gain through the various different publications, the things that I've just mentioned. There are 3 things that we suggested, wasn't there, that we were talking through. Can you remember what the first one was that we said links directly to the competencies as well, which is part of part 3?
Yes, I can. So were the practice areas suitable? That is a competence. When you get to your part 3, that's one of the things that we're graded on, the practice areas. And when you're going through the reference material, the publications give you an indication on what areas you can be using for what type of lesson. So there's guidance there in that first section on lesson planning.
And there is questions that come up in the part 1 with regards to lesson planning as well. How did you find lesson planning for yourself when you first started?
I struggled initially when I first started, and there are a few reasons. The first one, I started teaching in a town I'm not from. So I moved to Swindon and I just commuted in and out for work, and then became a driving instructor, didn't know the area. So that was the first challenge. The second one was I didn't really have any guidance in that area because my training was done elsewhere. I'd done 40 hours intensive. And if I'm being brutally honest, I think if I'd have looked more through the publications before qualifying, it would have given me a better insight. I almost had to try and learn it on the job. Fortunately for me, I was delivering free driving lessons. So I didn't feel as bad, maybe not knowing the area or not taking learners to the best area, because they wasn't paying for my time and they was aware it's a learning journey for them and for me.
Yeah.
But I did find that a bit of a challenge. What should I be using to achieve what? And as we've discussed in the previous episodes, my studying for the part 1 wasn't in depth as now in hindsight, I wish it was.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel like with the part 1 study, knowing where to look when you get to the part 3 section, It's knowing where to go back to. So even if you're going through something which might not be relevant to a question that pops up in part one, you've just planted the seed somewhere in your mind to think, right, when you have a question about were the lesson areas suitable and choosing your first lesson route with your student, then you think, I read that somewhere. Where's the book that I read that in? You can go back to that book. So you've got this more rounded knowledge. And instead of just hoping that you can put a question on Facebook and somebody's going to tell you, then you can go off and search for that. And I tell you what, the sense of achievement that you get when you find these things for yourself, I'm not poo-pooing the fact that there are plenty of great people that will answer your question on Facebook, but there's so much more pleasure in being able to find the answer for yourself. And you can speak with a bit more knowledge when it comes to these particular subjects, then, especially when you're talking to other PDIs in the future or other ADIs. You're able to back up what you've learned with where you've learned it from.
Absolutely. And there's something that stands out to me with what you were saying there about asking that question on social media. There is the one that comes up regularly. I'd say regularly. I see it quite often. And that is, I've had this question on my part one, what's the answer? And that is, what is rote learning? And I fell for that in one of my first part ones. I don't know what rote learning is. So I came back and Googled what rote learning is. It's one thing knowing that answer. Like, what is rote learning? Great, I can answer that, move on. But we're not equipping ourselves with the tools of what should we be using? What methods should we be using? What's proven? What works? Where's the guidance on how we should be managing as driving instructors? So that's just a little example where absolutely you can get the answer on social media, but are you getting the in-depth knowledge of what that question is actually asking? I don't think they need to know the answer to it. I think it's that individual has shown studying and enough knowledge that they're aware of the different kind of teaching strategies that we either can or should be using and things that maybe we shouldn't be using teaching learners.
Yeah, I agree. And again, these are questions that will pop up. I mean, I've seen that question, what is rote learning? It does pop up. Another one is Gestalt learning. What is Gestalt? I'm not going to say so here. That's something that will come up on the course that we do in the future. But if you want to go and look it up, then look it up. You can probably find it in the Driving Instructor's Handbook or Practical Teaching Skills for Driving Instructors. So look and see. You can Google it as well, but look in the books and how we can apply it into our particular industry. I think when we talk about the way that people learn for part one, we're talking about people like you and I that have come from a background which is not a teaching background as such. I mean, I was a trainer before you. I think that you taught in the previous role that you had, but we weren't qualified teachers. And if you think about some of the people that we've met on our journey in this industry so far, we've met people that were bus drivers or lorry drivers, people that worked in factories. And these are people that may have come across this job just for a change. Postmen, for example, that have spent 25 years walking and delivering letters and want to change. But they haven't learned before, and now they need to be able to teach. Where are they going to get that knowledge from? They could go to night school, or they can sit down and make a little bit of a plan for themselves, or find somebody who's out there that's going to be able to support them and help them to find a plan, a study plan, because everything they learn in these books is going to help them with part two and especially the part three.
Absolutely. And we need to be aware of that it is a teaching job. The ways that we can get the information out of the student and the way we deliver it, we are having to work as teachers, instructors, coaches, mentors, whatever we want to term ourselves as. And if you don't come from that background, or even if you do come from that background, it's a high risk job in a moving vehicle. So having as much information and knowledge as you can will help keep you and your student safe on the road and them safe for life with their driving. So as we've nicely linked this to the second section of the part three, where can the part one help us with the risk management category of being a driving instructor?
Well, if we talk about directions, perhaps, and instructions, were directions and instructions given clear and given in good time? So again, looking in the driving instructor's handbook or in the practical teaching skills book, there are two great resources there that help you to be able to understand how to give directions properly. I mean, I think when we were talking earlier on, you came up with a great example is, right, at the roundabout, I want you to turn left. So we've just given a right and we've just given a left. But actually, how much confusion is there in that? And one of the questions I've seen come up in part one is, what would be the correct format to ask somebody to turn right at a roundabout? Would it be A, B, C, or D? You're only going to get that knowledge if you know where it comes from in the first place. You can't just look at that and guess at it, because if you guess at it and you got it wrong, but you pass your part one with a few questions wrong, you won't know if that was the wrong one or the right one. So you might then go and start teaching your pupils to do that. And then when it comes to your part three exam, then you could be up the creek without a paddle in that one. Examiners sitting in the back are going to want to make sure that you're delivering that information in correct and timely manner. And after all, it's under the risk management category, isn't it? So we've got to score well in that particular category, of which you guys will find out a lot as you're moving through this whole process anyway. But yeah, directions is just one of the competencies, but it's a really important part of trying to keep us safe, keep your pupils safe, and keep everybody around you safe. So again, there's another link in.
Absolutely. And that in-depth knowledge, again, like you said, that might be the one that you've got wrong. And you then spend hours and hours potentially practicing the wrong thing. And you can get through part two, maybe not knowing those bits of information, and then come unstuck at part three. And we
Yeah,
almost think it's a problem at the part three stage when potentially we could be going all the way back to our studying for part one, which will then give us, like we've said a few times, those solid foundations for getting through your part three. And the next one, so the part three is in three bands, is teaching and learning strategies. So this is quite a big section on the part three. And there are a number of competencies in there. And we'll go through the scoring maybe in a later episode and how that works. But there's one of the competencies there that really stands out for me as proving that you've understood all the information for part one and now you can apply it while you're teaching your students. And that is, was the technical information given comprehensive, appropriate, and accurate? So they're quite clear with that competence that we need to be given accurate information. That tells us that we need to know our stuff before we can start teaching students.
it's very true. And I've sat in on sessions that I've been doing with PDIs where they've said something to me and they could swear blind that they were right. And are you sure about that? And they're like, yes, I think so. But they're quite happy to say something without really being able to back up that knowledge from anywhere, or certainly know where the knowledge came from. Now, I know that what they're saying is not necessarily wrong, but described in the incorrect way. A good one, for example, is the solid white lines, isn't it, in the middle of the road, where people say, oh, you mustn't overtake on solid white lines. But if you actually go and revise that a little bit more in depth, you'll understand that actually there are a few exceptions to that rule, and it's having that understanding which is going to help you, not just in the part one, it'll help you definitely in the part two, but equally, it's going to help you in the part three when you come to teaching this yourself. So it's about searching, looking, finding what you need, establishing this revision plan for yourself so that you're getting everything that you need, not just to pass the part one, but to stand you in good stead for the part two and three as well.
Absolutely. And those are just three examples, really, three competencies that we've highlighted as links where if you do effective study at your part one stage, they're going to pay dividends later on in your qualifying process. And it should ease the burden when you're preparing for a part three. I'm
Oh,
sure
I like
anyone,
that. Ease the
anyone,
burden.
yeah. And I expect anyone that's watching or listening to this has also come across other content that's out there of someone maybe talking to newly qualified ADIs and the amount of pressure that they faced on the part three. Being able to ease some of that by knowing that you've got enough information, you're giving correct information, you understand training areas, you understand how the risk is being shared, and you know how to part that information to your student, it's just going to give you that little more confidence going into your part three. And I think that's again where we can help. It's a part one course and it's preparing you for your part one. But if you look further down the line, you're going to have solid foundations to get through your part three and become a qualified driving instructor. Do you have any final points to add on those links between the part one and part three?
I think not actually at this stage. I think that we've covered everything that we need to cover, really. Um, Read the books, but if you're struggling with where to go, cherry pick. What do you want to know? What has come up which you're not sure about? Use the index, use the chapters. Don't think that you have to go and start at page one and finish at the end. These books can be utilized in a way that makes sense to you. Use post-its in the books. You know, just use some post-its, scribble notes onto the post-its, anything that draws your attention to these places. And as I said as well, if you're not a book reader, then have a look on YouTube for similar sorts of things and maybe complement what you see on YouTube and check that with what's written in the books. You know, I feel like we do need to check that YouTube stuff that we're seeing, that Facebook stuff that we're seeing, TikTok videos that we're seeing now as well, and check your understanding and matching it up with what you might find in a book as well. Because you don't want to hear something on TikTok and believe it to be true. You want to check that and know that it's true. So that's where the links really start to come in for part three, I think.
I agree with that. So if you would like some direction on your studying and you would like support to get you through the part three, you can head to our Facebook page or our Facebook group, or you can reach out to me or Craig directly. But the page and the group are the ADI Part 1 podcast. And stay tuned for the next few episodes where we will be talking about the different publications and what information you can get out of each of them. So you've got a bit of guidance on where to go and what you're likely to find. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We will catch you on the next one. How was that?